Unlike other economic downturns, the COVID pandemic has been unique in its impact on the trade show community. No one has been spared. Venues, manufacturers, show organizers, contractors, exhibitors, resellers, and even labor. We've all felt the pain of an industry on life support. Over the past year, our classic conversations have included representatives from most of the groups just mentioned, but not all. Today, we will discuss how a pandemic and the resumption of events, albeit in fits and starts, has affected labor. We have two guests today, Kevin McLaughlin and Bob Tarby, who will share their backgrounds and talk about how labor is working to meet the needs of exhibitors. This will be a Q&A session, so raise your hand or leave a question in the chat panel at any time. Kevin, would you mind starting by sharing your background and your responsibilities, please?
Yeah, and thank you. And I'm still trying to connect on so I'm on my phone here, so it's a little kind of weird. I'm trying to get on with, I've been having issues. But my name is Kevin McLaughlin. I'm the UBC, United Brotherhood of Carpenters, representative for the trade show industry nationally. I actually cover Chicago too. And that's where I'm based. I'm originally worked in Chicago. I've been Carpenter's member for 37 years, but I've been in the trade show industry now since probably in some way, shape, or form since about 1989. So I've been in and around it, and I know a lot of people all over the place in the industry. So that's very helpful for us and everyone else going forward. And like you said, with this pandemic, it's just been earth-shattering for our membership that we represent. So I don't know, we've done a lot of stuff for our members, trying to keep them engaged. And it's just been, it's just the slow pull out of this thing is making it even harder for us right now.
So I know, Kevin, you and I had talked about when we were first discussing having you come in on our classic conversation and meeting with our folks. I think you might be on your surface, yeah.
I gotta turn this off.
All the devices, right? So we'll just keep an eye out for him to come back in. I think, is he there?
Can you see me all right?
There you are. There you are. All right, I'm pinning you back up to the top. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate this. So we're back up at the top. We got you, Kevin. This is great. All right. So we had talked about not only the so we've got the two aspects, right? We've got the impact of COVID on the workers within the union workers, and then we've also got the other issue, which existed even prior to COVID, which was the kind of the aging out of our industry, right? So I know that those are two topics that you're very passionate about, and keeping those in the forefront. So I'm going to let you jump off with whichever one feels most, whichever one you feel most compelled to kind of talk about first. But I think those are our two, items that we kind of need to take a look at, and they can go hand in hand, but not necessarily, right? One is not, one is exacerbated by the other for sure, but take us through that.
Yeah, and and it's some of the conversations. I mean, I'm involved with ESCA, EACA, IEE. I'm actually on the board for the ECA, which is the Exhibition Conferences Alliance, which for lobbying, and So, and we've all discussed this, and we were prior to COVID, we were discussing the problems with our aging workforce. And it's not just on the labor end of it, it's the whole industry is going through this. And we were trying to do it a little collectively. We were actually setting up things to go visit with universities and a lot of that was management end of it. We're pushing that to go talk to some of these different universities that have, classes or degrees in hospitality and things like that, because a lot of them don't know our industry. Nobody knows what we do. And I don't have to tell you guys that. You tell them I work in the trade show and they're like, what? And so we were going to start doing that. And then of course, COVID hit and put a delay on all of that. So and we're still in the process. We want to try and get that going, but it is a little hard to sell something when you don't have anything to sell. And that's what we were dealing with going through COVID. So across the board, and this is something we need to address. All of our organizations that are involved in the industry need to work collectively, I think, to inform the younger generation of what our industry is and the benefits of it and how they can make a great living and a great enjoyable living in our industry. That's a big part of it. And it has affected us, like it's been referred to as the brain drain, and that's going on a little bit because of COVID. We've had a lot of people that are older in age and they're losing their insurance and everything else, so they have to pull their pensions to continue having medical benefits. So there have been a lot of people that really probably would have waited another year or two to retire that had to go early because of it. So that's going to affect us, because now you're bringing younger people in. You like them more seasoned people to train them. But we still have enough there, but it's going to be a little harder on all of us.
All right. Harold.
Yeah, this is a follow-up coming from Kevin Cardy, who's not really with us. Other than the hotel and restaurant industries, I think the trade show industry was hit harder in the chops than most. Kevin's question was, you've kind of just addressed the brain drain and losing others to maybe the home building industry over the last 18 months. But is there a plan on how you and your teammates are planning on rebuilding and replacing that labor force?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a few things that we're working on as far as trying to bring apprentices and younger people into the industry. One of the big problems we have with the trade show industry, we all have, and the Carpenters Union is unique, and I can't speak for all the other trades on this, but we have an apprentice program. In most of our markets, our apprentices are in a construction program. And there are a few that have a trade show program. But what we deal with is they have to work a certain amount of hours to advance in the program. And that's what we're dealing with right now is in the trade show industry, they can't work enough hours to advance. So we have to have them bounce back and forth. I'm working on something now actually in Chicago with some of the EACs to work together to share apprentices. So, and we'll have to monitor that, but so we can bring some in and we got to maintain their hours. And if one EAC can use them on this show, maybe another one can use them on the next show. That way they're continually working, they're learning the industry, and they're advancing in the program. That's some of the stuff we're up against. A lot of it is going to be, I think, like I say, recruiting we have apprentices in all of our training centers. It's just a matter of a lot of them don't know our industry and trying to discuss with them the opportunities that are there. The problem is right now the opportunities are not there, and it makes it a lot harder for us to do it. But going forward, as things get better, and I'm hoping by early or middle of next year, them opportunities will increase and we'll be able to get more people involved with that. And I'm talking to different agents and in different cities, I mean, obviously we don't do the jurisdiction in every city, you know that. So, but in the cities we're in, we're trying very hard to get a younger population in there. We got to get them in there now because we need to get them trained and working with our more seasoned people.
If Kevin Cardy were here, he would say, hey, thanks.
Yeah. Well, and so I know that that's been a huge task that you've been working on, Kevin. is there crossover between the different regions that you've been also working on in accessing folks from not just, you know, the Northeast, you know, maybe they're being able to kind of having more of a co-op, being able to be accessed, you know, down in the Southeast when it's necessary. I mean, is there cross regions within the union that is happening as well to kind of facilitate that work, or anything along that lines that you can speak to?
Yes, it does. That does happen. The problem, and I'm sure a lot of you would understand this, actually in the East, what we call our Eastern District, which is the whole Northeast US, members can go in any city within that district and work in the trade show industry. The problem is that a lot of the contractors, if I'm a contractor out of Seattle and I have a show in Chicago, it's quite an expense for me to travel carpenters from Seattle to Chicago. So a lot of times what they will do is they will hire local labor because of the expense for the housing and all the other flights and everything else involved with that. That's one of the bigger issues. There are, and you know this, there's carpenters that travel all over the country for certain exhibitors, and they do that. But to do it on a larger scale, it's not cost prohibitive for the contractors to do it. But that's why, you know, that's some of the stuff we're dealing with in like the Houston market. The Houston market is more of a mid-range market for us. So it's much harder to keep people employed in the industry because it's not back-to-back shows like New York or Detroit or Chicago and things like that. It just makes it a little harder to work. But now the state of Texas, there's guys from New Orleans that come up and work in Houston and vice versa, because that's within that same council. So it does happen. But like I say, a lot of that's them doing it on their own and not the contractor sending them. Because if the contractor's sending them, they got to put them up in a hotel and everything else. And that's where it gets a little cost prohibitive for them.
Right. Jim, did you have something?
I'm going to ask, what's your least challenging market for labor?
What do you mean by least challenging?
Getting enough labor and qualified and so forth.
As far as the best labor market?
Yeah, where you have the least challenges with pulling enough labor in.
Oh, that right now for me, that would be it. I don't want to even say Houston, but Houston's probably for me, and it's not that big of a problem, but it is a problem at times when there's multiple shows going in. But that's for me, that's probably like, because you know, I mean, Javits, McCormick Place, Pacific Northwest, we don't have any labor shortages usually. Pacific Northwest has had a few issues here and there, but it's very minimal. They really haven't come back out of this thing yet that well anyway, Seattle and Portland. So they're starting, but we haven't had too many issues there. Vegas is all Teamsters. The carpenters fill in on the secondary. Once the Teamsters calls are extinguished, then the carpenters fill in after that. And we haven't, I know the Teamsters have had a few issues out there, but the carpenters have been filling in. So I don't think there's been any issues out there.
Jen, can I ask?
Yeah, please.
Here's a little bit of politics tossed in. If you look at different cities around the country, there's different opinions on mask mandates and vaccination requirements. Recently, we've heard some rumblings that in Las Vegas, some of the carpenters union, as much as 50% are pushing back against vaccines or getting vaccinated. Not sure if that number is exact, but it's enough for that people are talking about it. Can you respond to how that's affecting things or how it will affect things?
Okay, and well, if it's in Vegas, I haven't heard about the Carpenters Union, but it is possible it's the Teamsters Union, because that's who's predominantly the workforce in Vegas.
Excuse me.
I'm dealing with a lot of that, and that's kind of why I was late getting on this today, and I apologize for that. Yesterday, I had a meeting in Chicago. The Radiology Society is going with a vaccine mandate. And we had a meeting with the association yesterday. We're in support of it. And I do have members that do not want to get vaccinated. Every trade does. I'm sure, you probably all have employees that don't want to. So we're dealing with it as we can. If it's a mandate and it's predominantly, and that's one of the things the unions and the contractors deal with. If the contractors make a mandatory, it becomes a collective bargaining issue and we have to negotiate that. But if it's mandated by a third party, it's out of our hands. So, and we deal with it in the construction end too, with building owners, universities, hospitals. We have any construction people going in there, they have to be vaccinated. And that's kind of what we're dealing with when the associations or a venue does it. It's third party, so they have to be vaccinated. Now we're trying to get word out to our members that radiology I'm glad it was coming out ahead of time on this, because if it's mandatory, it's mandatory. We don't have a choice, and we will fill the labor call. And if we have to reach out to our construction carpenters because some of the trade show guys don't want to get vaccinated, we'll get carpenters in there to fill those calls. And I don't think it'll be that big of an issue, but you're going to have some of it that'll come up where you won't have members that want to get vaccinated. Now, 50% is an awful lot. I hope to God they don't have those issues out there, but we've been telling, I'm 100% for it. I think it just because obviously in the industry, if our customers are not comfortable coming, they're not going to come. And we have to do whatever we need to do to make the customer comfortable to keep this industry moving, because we can't afford to shut it down again. It doesn't. We were hit first and we're the last out of this, and we were hit the hardest, and nobody knows who we are. That's the biggest problems we're facing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick on somebody here that Mr. Rogowitz, because you're right there in the middle of my screen. And so, of course, I'm going to ask you to unmute and share any thoughts, because it's a classic conversation. Why wouldn't I? There you go.
All right. Thoughts on?
Yeah, thoughts on.
Yeah. We've had a tough run here as everybody has for the last 3 months. We've lost about $750,000 in jobs in about the last 4 weeks for client pullouts. And so my thoughts aren't real pleasant. We're suffering like everybody else. I mean, we're getting little things here and there, enough to, keep our head above water, kind of. Haven't had a real labor problem per se. I've had vendor problems, had freight problems, had a lot of supplier side problems, but haven't really had a lot of labor problems. But at the same time, there's not a lot of shows. I haven't done a whole lot of shows, a lot of big booths at this time. So it's kind of my input. We're just trying to survive, I think, like everybody else. Most of the pullouts that we had are not due to show closings, but due to clients that are pulling out of shows. They're pulling out of shows because of COVID. The next big one coming up is PMA for us. And I don't know if they'll shut PMA down due to COVID, but they have the hurricane now, and we have some pretty good sized clients that were going to that show too. So we're kind of waiting on that one, but that's where we're at. You guys haven't seen me for quite a few weeks. We've been busy like everybody else. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Get the design, get the quote, get the design, get the quote. All right, we're ready to sign off. And oh yeah, by the way, we're not going. So I know everybody on this call's experienced that. So that's my thoughts.
Well, thanks for sharing. I appreciate you.
Yep.
It's good to see your face amongst the gallery. So I always
thank you. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, Mel.
So Kevin, one of the things I know that back in May and in June, we were all kind of worried that things would ramp up pretty significantly in the fall, and that would stress labor. It's a little bit, obviously, we've gone into fall, and I use the term fits and starts. It hasn't been as chaotic as we all thought it would be. I mean, it's been somewhat busy, but it hasn't been as chaotic. As we go into January, February, March, and let's hope that things start to ebb a little bit. There's a chance that it's actually going to be even worse than what we predicted in September and October as far as overlapping shows, the number of shows, getting labor. I guess my question is, with all of that, Kevin, is I know you're doing a good job of trying to get the labor, trying to get your guys in there, but what's the alternative on a show in Vegas where you can't get enough labor? What happens to the exhibitors? Is there some relaxation of rules? What do you think will be the kind of safety valve in order for the show to go on?
Well, and we haven't talked about as far as if we can't man the calls. I have talked with the other trades and being part of being part of ECA. We had to form an alliance to be part of ECA. So we have a labor alliance, and it's the carpenters, the stagehands, electricians, sign painters union, and the, who am I forgetting? Teamsters. And so we're the 5 main trades that work in the trade show industry nationally. The sign painters are the ones that handle basically California, Southern Cal. They're the guys that do all, they call them decorators, but it's the sign painters union. We've all discussed this. If this is an issue in a certain city, and that's kind of what goes on in Vegas right now, if the Teamsters can't fill a labor call, a lot of the contractors have a secondary agreement with the carpenters. So then the carpenters will fill in and help fill that call. And we've talked with the other trades that if this is what needs to be done, we are all there to help each other out. And that's, the contractors can sign secondary agreements with all the trades. So that if there's a problem filling labor calls, we can just dip into the other trades. And one of the things I'll tell you where we're a little unique, basically us and the electricians are a little unique because we have tradesmen that work in the construction industry. And when they're working, if they're not working in the construction industry and they're out of work and we need labor in the trade show venues, they can come right in. And I'll be honest with you, those guys, they come into the trade show industry and it's almost like a vacation for them compared to working on building homes or some high rise. If they come inside to a venue like that and they're like, really, I can do this? And, and it is, they're very well versed in most aspects of construction. So they do kind of sway right into the trade show. And there's obviously certain things they don't know, but they pick up real quickly. So we've never had any major issues, like I say, and I know the electricians are in the same boat. We've had discussions about that because they have a lot of construction guys that they can bring in when they need extra people.
Thanks, Kevin. Harold.
So over the last 30 years, this is just an opinion, there seems like there's been a wall between labor and exhibitors. But over the last 18 months with the pandemic, that wall has shrunk, if not gone away, due to exhibitor advocacy or people all pulling the rope in the same direction at the same time. So the question I have is, do you think that the current bridge that has been built kind of over that wall connecting labor and exhibitors is sustainable? And if it is, could it even be grown? Do you see the future between exhibitor and labor closer relationship than ever before? Or it sounds nice, but that's never going to happen?
No, I think it needs to be there. And I'm actually, I have a meeting on Friday. I'm part of the exhibitor advocacy group that they've been around. Prior to me, Ken Viskovich was the gentleman that had the position I have now. Ken was on that group and I followed through. We've always been involved with this and we're the only labor involved in that. But a lot of this, like I say, since the pandemic, I've always, I can tell you this, back in the day, and the Carpenters Union has been very much a spearhead in doing this in the sense that the contractors are our partners. We don't look at them as the enemy. And that was the old union way. The contractor was the enemy, they're our partners. If they're not making money, our members aren't making money. And that's how we're in this together. And we firmly believe that. And I can tell you a story back years ago when I was working strictly at McCormick Place. I used to make it a point to, every time a show organizer came into McCormick Place, I would go down to the building and go meet with the show organizer. Well, the contractors used to try to stop me from doing that because it was their customer. That's how they looked at it. Not, they didn't, they wanted to keep a separation between the unions and the show organizers because they used us as an excuse for everything that was going on. And those days have changed. And like I say, I try to be as involved as I can with any show organizers, venues, anything we can do, because we all need to work collectively to do this. And one of the other things that we're doing, and I know in the the Northeast, we do this, we're trying to do it down south, is we have a labor management committee. We have an advisory committee, a McCormick Place advisory committee is similar. The McCormick Place one has actually show organizers, exhibitors, contractors, and labor. We meet quarterly and discuss any issues that come up. And that's kind of what they're doing with the labor management ones in the East, and we're going to do in the South, is we get together quarterly. And that way, when there's issues that come up, we're addressing them, we're discussing them, and we're going to resolve them so that we don't wait for 3-4 years when we go to contract negotiations. No, let's get this stuff settled now and straighten it out and move forward. And it's for the betterment of all of us in the industry, and we need to keep doing that. And I think that needs to stay, and the exhibitors need to have their voice, and they need to be heard, because there's that, to me, that is it's resounding and getting louder, and I love hearing it, and anything we can do to help that, I'm more than willing to be part of that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's a great question, Harold. And yeah, that's the piece that I forget that you sometimes bring to this conversation, Kevin, is about the exhibitor advocacy and how you've gotten involved with that. We just had Amanda in June, July, come and speak with all of our classic conversation groups regarding exhibitor advocacy. So it's good to hear the consistency in that message, and also the support that I think that your group and voices lend to that exhibitor advocacy piece as well. So thank you for that. Where do you kind of see that? And I just find it interesting that you guys have how you have approached that and are in support of that, because it hasn't been typical, right? That's not something that you, so I guess where do you kind of see it going from your standpoint of the trades and all of that? Are other trades thinking that they would get involved with the exhibitor advocacy piece of it? Like, maybe give us a little bit more of a temperature on all of that.
I'm honest with you, I haven't had those conversations with the other trades, because I wouldn't mind doing that, and I would be willing to do that. I don't know, and that's something I could probably even talk to Amanda about. I don't know how willing some of them would be or wouldn't be. I think they would be. I think it's good for the exhibitor aspect, because bottom line is that's why we do what we do. That's who we do it for, so I don't see why that would be an issue. I think that would be very helpful. But and I think that we do need to have those conversations, and I do see it moving forward, like I say, because their voices need to be heard. And I think every show organizer should have an exhibitor committee. I've dealt with PitCon for years, and they've had one for years, and sitting in those meetings weren't the most comfortable things to be at, but you do what you gotta do when you're getting barraged with some of these questions that you don't expect. And it's like, but that's why we do it though. And then if we don't know the answer, then let's try and fix this together.
Yeah. Yes. I think, I think that really understand how maybe much, and I hate to use the word scapegoat, but that's kind of what is coming up for me. So I have to throw it out there, but I feel like, yeah, that's definitely been something that has, that I've heard in all the years that I've been in this industry, and is, kind of that union scapegoat, right? That well, we do these things because we have these contracts, and so I think you guys end up getting sort of that bad rap about it. When in fact, I think it's, to your point, maybe because lack of understanding and knowledge about what really transpires in getting those contracts with the show organizers and the GCs and all of that. So
Yeah, but and that, and when you get a bad reputation, things that were done in the past, it is extremely difficult and takes a while to fix that. And I believe all the unions are working to do that. And there were things that they did that shouldn't have been done. But we're gonna move forward and change the way things are done. That's what we have to do.
Agreed. Sorry, I thought I saw somebody raise their hand, but maybe it was just
While
a
we're waiting
figment of
for-
my
while we're
imagination.
waiting for those hands to raise, I like asking this question. I ask it to a lot of our guests. If you could have a fairy godmother grant you a single wish, looking forward, not backwards, but looking forward, what one thing would you change right now as we look forward to a growing, brighter future?
Well, that's right now, that's an easy one, that COVID wouldn't exist, would be my first one, that COVID would not be an issue, because I think that's created all the problems that we are having right now. But other than that, something a little different, I think it would be, for the industry in a whole, everyone needs to be, and that's what I've enjoyed with with a lot of these meetings and things I've been invited to. We need to be a collective voice, and we need to hear everybody, and everybody needs to be participating in the conversation. And I think that really needs to be moving forward. It needs to continue.
Wow. Mel, how do you follow that?
I've got a question, and I think it's really a question from the classic community here. And I'm going to ask it diplomatically, Kevin, and I know you'll answer it diplomatically. And this is really when distributors often ask us who they should work with as far as labor at the show. More often than not, we recommend an EAC rather than going with the general labor pool of the GSC. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because we will consistently recommend an EAC, whoever that EAC is, as opposed to working the GSC's pool. Is there a difference? I mean, as far as your members, as far as how those things are handled? I'm just curious from your perspective.
Yeah, and the labor is relatively the same, okay? But yes and no. Let me preface that, because obviously, if you're working with an EAC, they have their core group of people that are their regulars, work with them regularly. So a customer that comes in, you do get treated differently when you're working with an EAC than a general service contractor, because the general service contractors have a lot more responsibilities that they're worried about. And the show organizer is number one. And it really is, they have different divisions that handle the exhibitors. But the labor is generally the same. It's coming from the same group for the most part. But you do get a different service with the EACs. I mean, I see that, I know that, the general service contractors try to do that, but to some extent they're spread out too thin. So they can't give the customers the time that the customers want. And the EACs are better at doing that.
Do your members have a preference on working for one or the other?
It's funny, some will only work for the general service contractor, some will only work for one EAC their whole career. I mean, it's just what the individual wants. There's some that float from company to company, some go back and forth between the two, but majority they either work for the EACs or they work for the general service contractor. It's just where they got into a slot, and they kind of almost stay where they're at for the most of the time. They will float around a little bit, but a lot of them kind of, because we're not a hiring hall, and that's where we're different. And depending on the market, some markets we have our hiring halls, but like in the Chicago market, we're 100% call by name. So the contractor calls our members to go to work. The local union only will fill in the call if the contractor calls and says, hey, I need 25 more guys, I don't have enough. And then we can help them get more labor. But our guys are 100% call by name. So our guys kind of have to make their own way. Because if you go to a job and you're a slug and you don't do your job, well, they're not calling you next time. So, I mean, there's a lot to be, we have a lot of members that would like to have seniority, because some trades do that, but we don't have that. And it makes for, in my mind, it makes for a more honest system as far as the members go, because they have to make their own way.
Okay.
That's good insight. So how do you feel about certain, this is come up in conversations and is being talked about, but how do you feel about the actual like division of duties, I guess is the best way to say it, amongst the union, like which trades get which? Like you just were talking about it in the Southern California market, how it's the sign painters union, but they're called decorators, and how certain union or certain trades get responsible for certain tasks, I guess, within our industry. For example, electricians building light boxes, or versus stagehands building that same light box at another venue or in another show city, or so how do you feel about those kinds of divisions of the different
Sure.
jobs within the trade show world?
Yeah, and it's jurisdictional is what we call it, different jurisdiction. And that, I can tell you, most of that was established long before I was even around. So, and that's where it gets difficult, because established jurisdictions, and even like Southern California, the sign painters, the contractors are signed to collective bargaining agreements with the sign painters. So they're bound to hire the sign painters in Southern California, because that's part of that collective bargaining agreement. Now, like I said, they can sign secondaries with other trades if they have issues, but down there, they actually have pretty good labor down there, and they don't have problems filling labor calls. As far as who's doing jurisdiction, I mean, that stuff comes up all the time. And there's certain issues that it doesn't have to do with trade show work, but the Carpenters Union is not right now part of the AFL-CIO, and they haven't been for years. And a lot of that goes back to jurisdictions. When we're dealing with jurisdictions on construction stuff, and it's based on a decision that was made in 1925, we have a problem with that, because things are a little different than they were in 1925. So those issues need to be resolved, and it goes much beyond me and the electricians. If we have an argument over something, having a conversation, because it can go much higher than us when it comes down to that, and that's where it gets complicated. So to try and explain it all in a short conversation, there's some things about it that are ridiculous, and I agree on that. But the two unions need to sit down and discuss it and try to do in my opinion, do what's best for everyone involved and what's easiest for everyone involved. It's easy for me to say that because it doesn't always seem to work that way. And especially from your end, it doesn't work that way. But ideally, it would that's what I think it should. There should be easy resolutions to this. Most of them are done pretty quickly. And believe me, there's stuff that goes on that most of you probably wouldn't even know went on. And that's the way it should be. But it needs to be a little simpler than it is, but it's way above my pay grade is the problem.
I didn't think anybody was above your pay grade, Mr.
Yeah, I don't know. I got lots of
well, so now Mr. Fallberg has moved into the middle of my screen, and his face is always a good one to see in our conversations. And, you know, this is, I have to just say, I mean, we all kind of are taking for granted the fact that we're together in this one big group, because that doesn't always happen. So I'm a little like kid in a candy store that I get to tap into some of these other groups that I haven't been involved with. But I'm just curious on your thoughts. Got any to share with us?
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting to be called on.
Oh, well, you know,
just,
it's the teacher in me.
I just made a comment in the chat saying, you know, if the unions were a little bit more transparent, and if they, you know, substantiated their policies and pricing, that, you know, it could go a long way to make the exhibitors go, okay, I get it. I understand it. You know, we're not, you know, it would be less of a bad rap for the unions. And I wonder what you guys think about that.
If you could repeat that, Brett, I'm having Wi-Fi kind of got bogged down there. I couldn't hear the whole thing.
Yeah, it's in the chat as well if you open that up. But I just was commenting that if you guys were, you know, really transparent. I mean, I think that you know, we're talking about how the unions get a bad rap sometimes. But if you did a better job of explaining what your pricing policies are and why you do what you do, you know, you could go a long way to substantiating that and putting the exhibitor's mind at rest that, okay, I get why they're doing what they're doing and this is fair. That would go a long way, I think, to, you know, helping out that relationship. And I just wondered what your thoughts were, you know, on any PR type initiatives that the Carpenters Union, you know, might be taking to, you know, get the exhibitor on your side, you know?
Well, and you know, and I've had multiple discussions with a lot of people on this. When you say pricing, we don't establish pricing. You know, we have, you know, our members make a certain wage and then they have a benefit package attached to it. Every market is different, so that for us to broadcast out what our wage rates are, it would get extremely complicated because, you know, if I'm working in Chicago or if I'm working in Joliet, Illinois, it's totally different. And that's where it gets complicated, but we don't establish pricing. And anyone that asks any of our members what they're getting paid, they'll tell them. And that's, you know, as opposed to what you're being billed. There's a big difference, and you guys know that. And that's where always the bad stuff comes in, is because the exhibitor looks at that billing price and like, these guys are making this much money. It's like, no, they're not. But I understand what you're saying, but it would be extremely complicated for us to put it out there, because it's not only us, it's all the other trades would have to do the same thing too. And I don't know, like I say, every city the rates are different. The benefit packages are different. It would get extremely complicated for us to spread that out there without people getting the wrong information attached to the wrong city or attached to the wrong union. And that's where it gets complicated. So I understand what you're saying. And I think if us having conversations like this, I mean, would be the best way to try and get that out there. I don't know how or what the easiest way to do that would be.
Yeah. No, I think,
Brad, do you think part of that issue is because it changes from city to city, region to region, that an exhibitor comes into an exhibit hall and doesn't know what to expect? And so who's responsible for hanging signs, who's responsible for, you know, hanging monitors, because it changes on there. do you feel like that's the responsibility of the union to communicate, or the show organizer, or the GSC, or really the show hall? Who bears that responsibility for the exhibitor's lack of knowledge?
That was directed to me.
Yes, either one of you. I'm just curious because we're all confused. When we go into Omaha, Denver, Las Vegas, wherever, we have to re-educate ourselves on what are the jurisdictional rules within that city. And I don't think the GSC always does a good job as far as communicating it before the show or the show organizer. So you end up pointing the finger at the union that it's their problem, that they're at fault, as opposed to the people who are doing the upfront communications.
I think if the goal is for the exhibitor's experience to be better as we come out of the pandemic and recover, and this is just a carryover from before the pandemic, they wanted transparency and predictability. And the transparency part is what I was alluding to. They need to understand, why are you charging me what you are? Do they need to know what your healthcare program is, and et cetera? No, they don't need to get into that level of detail, but they do need to have at least a sense that you care. And I don't just mean the unions. I mean, all players that are charging exhibitors need to care about the fact that their customer has largely been pretty freaking unhappy with how they've been treated well before the pandemic. And if we want this medium to be successful, I think that all the players that are suppliers to the exhibitors need to do a better job of communicating with them, being more transparent, sell yourself, make it a PR kind of thing, and try to provide some predictability, because the trade show managers are just complaining that at the end of the show they get a reconciliation and their drayage bill. We all know this. Their drayage bill is 30% higher because of something that was out of their control, and their managers are going, what the heck is with that? And my point here is that I think all players have got to care more about at least trying to sell the value of what they're doing and substantiate it and try to make it more predictable. My 2 cents.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I think that plays directly into that exhibitor advocacy for sure. I could ask you to speculate, Kevin, as to why it's so difficult for maybe some of the other trades to come on board with the advocacy. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't. I think the problem, which I don't know if they've been given the opportunity, but even other than that, I think a lot of them, there is, I don't want to say nervousness, but they tend to let the contractor make the calls with that stuff. And I don't, but like I say, the ones that I deal with, the leaders that I deal with are much different mindset than what we've dealt with in the past. And I think that would be definitely more receptive for them to get involved with stuff like that. Especially, I don't know, Joanne Sanders is with the stagehands. Joanne's great. And she's been on some of other calls that we've had, and she would definitely be very well, love to get involved with stuff like that, just to dispel the myths. I mean, that's what we've been trying to do forever, and there are a lot of myths out there, and we want to make sure that we can do whatever we can to dispel them. But like Brad had said too, the problem is, a myth in this city is different than a myth in this city, and that's where we need to talk directly to the people that are asking the questions. And that's the only way it's going to get corrected, I think.
Hey, Jen.
Yeah, we've got John that's had his hand up for quite a minute, and so I wanted to get to him, Jim, if that's okay, before we get to your question. Okay, cool.
Thanks, and thanks for everyone having me. I'll if I can, put my hand back down. It's very rude to keep it up through this whole time. Lowering my hand. I started with the thought in one direction, and then Brad got me spinning in 6 other directions. And I'm in the interest of keeping it positive, as a 30-year sales guy. It's awfully hard to keep quiet in the industry. So the first point, which I think is the most relevant, is that our clients are the exhibitors who are working through us, through Classic, through Exhibitus. We talked about the brain drain. We're going to lose an entire generation of exhibit managers and exhibit folks, people that have been doing this for, my clients when I first started at Exhibit Group had been doing this for 20, 30 years and knew more about it than I did, but I was just a conduit to their solution. I'm now working predominantly, at least on most every call, a 23, 26, 28-year-old marketing person. And they don't give a crap about unions or child labor or what had to happen 150 years ago to get, Billy out of the steel mill so that he could go to school. So that's the first part. When somebody calls up and it's like, well, we got this thing going on in New York City and, we want to do a 30 by 40 and, what do you think it'll cost for the exhibit? We have an idea. We know what about that's going to be. And then they're like, well, what do you think it'll cost to set it up? I said, well, number one, your base rate's $220 an hour. And they're like, what in the heck do we get for that? The president doesn't make $220 an hour. The president of anything. I don't want to get into a political argument. I don't want to go down Harold's path. Sorry. But those are the, so that's the issue, that they're not, they've heard of unions before, but they don't really care. They don't care if a decorator or a stagehand or a rigger or an electrician or anybody has to, who has to do it or why they have to do it. They know that it's expensive, and God forbid if we're in Philadelphia, they've got 6 unions that are all trying to do the same thing because it's their jurisdiction, possibly. So that's the message, getting that message to a 2-3 year person just out of college, is tricky, and they don't care. They do when they have to consolidate their billing at the end of the show. But secondarily, and what we're seeing, and maybe you can respond to this and maybe you can't, but the two largest of our general contractors, the one that has 3 letters and the one that starts with an F, are making it exceedingly difficult for exhibitors and exhibit companies to file EACs. And we're noticing that it's getting quite restrictive in the way that we can ask for an EAC to participate in labor in the grand scheme of things. And it feels like, my opinion, I'll leave it at that they're pushing us and their clients into creating a business model that, benefits them, because they're both somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% down year over year, like the rest of us are. So the GCs I don't believe, have any interest in pulling open the curtain and showing their customers what the money goes to and having any transparency. And I could be wrong with that, but I think that's our big battle of, if the end exhibitor knew where the extra $120 an hour went that the carpenter wasn't getting paid, what that went for, and God forbid what, the drayage numbers go for, and any of those types of things, that's the transparency. And I don't see that ever changing in our industry. I'm done talking. Thank you.
The only thing just like I say, because with being involved with the exhibitor advocacy group, and that's always a big topic, and to get those 2 companies you referred to that basically control 95% of the shows nationally, to do that, it's the only way it's going to happen is by all of us working together to put enough pressure on them. And will that even do it? I honestly can't answer that, because they've had pressure on them to do it for a long time, and it hasn't changed. And what we used to refer to it, and if any of them are on there, they'll get pissed off at me, but I really don't care. We used to call it the shell game, because you know, we bitch and scream like, hey, you're charging these people this much, telling them this is what the carpenters are getting paid. And then they'd, all right, the next show they'd lower the carpenter's rate, but then the garbage cans go up, or the tables go up, or the freight goes up, and that's what we always called it, the shell game, that the profit never changed. They just put it somewhere else. And that's, yeah, it needs to be more transparent, but the only people that can make them do that are the people that pay the bills.
Yeah.
We don't pay the bills.
Just real quick, I have a little bit different take on it in terms of where the responsibility of the transparency really lies. And that is on show management, show organizers. They're the ones that are hiring these, they're making the deals with the show contractors. They're getting a ton of freebies from the show contractors. And if you ask where the money's going, how about the beautiful entryways and all the things that they're doing for free? So they have to make their revenue up somewhere. I'm not saying they're perfect, believe me, but show organizers insist on having a lot of freebies. If you really knew, talk about transparency, if you really knew how much the GCs do for the show organizers, I think everybody would be shocked. But the contractors can't throw the organizers under the bus because that's who's hiring them to do the job. Yeah. But they'd love to be able to say, well, guess what? I just decorated half this show or maybe the whole show for free. So they send their clients, the exhibitors, over to the GCs to order all this stuff, and they have to charge high prices for it. I think that's a very strong and legitimate argument that people don't think about.
Well, and that's been something that Amanda's brought to the forefront in every conversation that I've ever been in, where she's been on the call speaking about the exhibitor advocacy, is once you get both sides to even go through a show line item by line item and start comparing and looking at the actual costs and understanding where each one of those is coming from, that's been the solution right there to get the NABs, the PAC Expos of the world to shift that, make that shift and make those changes on those items. So I think that's a great and valid point for sure. Mark Bendixson had his hand patiently up, and then we've got Riley, and I appreciate it. We're like 5 minutes over, but I think this is a really important conversation. So if you're able to hang with us, please do. We'll.
Well, you know, Jim kind of covered what I was going to say. I've said this in other ones, but the analogy that I always would give clients when they were complaining about carpenter rates or drayage rates is I would say, you know, it's the association that you're buying booth space from, because they want the private meeting room, they want the deluxe aisle sign, they want the plush aisle carpet, they want the shrimp passed on a tray at the opening reception, and they want all these other freebies. And those all end up in the drayage bill. Those all end up in the installation rates. I always use the analogy, it's like a wedding. And it's the bridezilla that wants the free second cake and the nice place settings and all the other crap. And so when you're complaining about the $12 beers in the cash bar, it's not the caterer, it's the bride. And so when you're complaining about your drayage rates, it's not the decorator or the drayage vendor, it's the association that you belong to. Other side of the coin, it's like these cities that are having defund the cops things going on. It's not the cops, it's a couple bad cops. And if you've got a couple guys in a booth and a stupid client brings in a whole skid of IKEA furniture because they think that's a smart thing to do, and you got one guy in the booth that says, oh, that stuff's a nightmare to set up, wait till after 4:30. We'll be on overtime. It'll take forever. That's all it takes, is for one customer to overhear that one guy saying one stupid thing. And, you know, that gets around pretty fast.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, Mark, one of the issues that I've had for years is if all the carpenters working on a trade show do everything 100% perfect, right? Not that that ever happens, but if they did. But then another guy from another trade says something like you just referred to, it reflects on everybody in that building, because it's not the Teamster said this, the electrician said this, it's the union guy said this. And that's what I deal with. And it's daily. And believe me, I reiterated with my members, like, look, you need to, and one of the things we have is a customer service training program, which we just did one down in Houston for our members down there. And it's actually 6 parts. And we've never got past the first part. The first part is the main part. It's a 4-hour course, but that's basically, it tells our members that you're an ambassador for the venue, contractor, your city. You're dealing directly with the customer. Those people need to have a great experience, because one little thing reverberates across the industry. We need to make sure they all understand that they're representing all of us, the union, the contractors, and like I said, they need to understand that, because you know what, you tick that one guy off on that one show, and it can affect 2 other shows from coming to your city, because people hear about stuff like that. So, and that's a big part of what we've been doing this now for about 8-10 years, this customer service training, and we move it around and try to hit all our main cities with it. And hopefully we'll get to the next level of it, because like I say, the first class is the main one and hits the main issues. And that's why we're just trying to get most of our guys through this.
One of the things too is that, you work in trade shows page on Facebook. That doesn't do you any favors. I remember, after the quarantine, there was a guy who was an exhibit manager that came on there and made a post. And he says, after 3 months of being locked in my house and not going to trade shows, I got to tell you, listen to you guys bitch 24 hours a day about you better go to work pretty soon, because you're running out of zip ties and visqueen and you haven't been able to steal any for 3 months. I'm going to start looking at my labor and drayage bills a lot closer when I go back to work. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is just like a PR nightmare.
Yeah, I'm not on Facebook, and I have other reasons for that. But I hear about all of that, but like I say, and that's people from all over the place, and we can't control that. And
oh yeah, I'm just saying, it's not doing you any favors.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's mine.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Hey, Riley. Good to see your face.
Hey.
You had a comment in the chat, and then I think we're gonna wrap everybody up in a burrito. Oh, and Rob's got a quick question, but Riley, what are your?
Well, so kind of going off what everyone's saying, I'm 28. I got in this industry when I was 19. I look at labor rates in certain cities, it is what it is, kind of like what Robin said. It's like freight. There's no way around it. And as a salesperson, you're kind of responsible when someone's like, I want to do a 40x40 space in, New York. As a salesperson, you start salivating because, you got a big booth coming through, but then you've got to, inform your client of, okay, well, you got to allow for labor and freight and this and that. So my question is, so I can be more informed, is there a way that I can figure out what city and what convention hall has the rights to that? If it's Boston, is it the Teamsters? Denver, IATSE, where can I find more information on, who has rights to what convention center?
I don't know if there's anything out there because I sometimes have a hard time finding who's in what city. I'll be honest with you. If we're not there, I don't know who is. So there used to be a website that somebody had put together, whether that it's been updated or not, basically labor jurisdictions in whatever city. And I remember this years ago, and it was predominantly correct. The only other thing I can say is if you're dealing with, you can obviously call the general service contractor. They should know whose jurisdiction is in what city, or you can call the venue. The venues would know that. The venue should know that.
Hey, Riley, I think the other person who would know is if you reach out to Jim Worm at EACA, because he's dealing with the EACs across the country. that he probably just knows off the top of his head who has jurisdiction in every single major city.
What was his name? Sorry.
Jim
Worm?
Worm.
Yeah.
I'll put his email in the chat really quick.
Yeah, and Jim is a good source too, but yeah, he would know, and if Jim doesn't know, he'll find out for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just like that information. So, because it is what it is, the union rates and the cost of doing business in this industry. But just so me as a salesperson, when someone's like, I want to do a show at this city, and then I can just let them know, okay, well, look, it's the carpenters union that they're, this is the rates there. You're going to be paying a lot for labor. So we've got to make sure your booth doesn't eat into that cost.
Riley, when you do that, you just, because if it's carpenters, teamsters, electricians, whoever it is in that city, they do not set the show rates. That's no organizer and the general service contractor that set the, but see, that's part of the myth. If you say, well, the carpenters union is in Chicago and these are the rates that the carpenters union sets, that's not true, and you're extending the myth, which is making it worse for all of us. The customer needs to know who sets those rates so that they know who to go after when they have a problem with it.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Great question, Riley. Rob, round us out, because we run us 15 minutes over. Good conversation.
All right.
Love it.
I
Love
have,
it.
3 different comments/questions. First of all, I got an email today saying NAB was not going to happen.
Yep.
That show's supposed to happen in October.
Yep.
And what other shows are going to do that? And so how are labor or any of us going to make any money if we go through this again and shows start to cancel? Number 2, about labor rates. As far as I know, every single company in America has a labor rate. You may not know what it is, but they still have it. I know that when I got to have work done on my own database, which is pretty extensive database, it cost me $150 an hour to have that company that helps me service it. $150 an hour. That's sometimes some cities I can get labor for less than $150 an hour. So customers also have labor rates, and they're probably set high. It's just that the trade show manager that you're working with has no idea what their labor rate is. And then the other question I have kind of is for Mel. What about your labor in your shop and also in your office? You had to lay a bunch of people off and you needed to rehire. Have you been able to get back the same labor, or do you have to, are you even up to speed labor wise? And if you had to hire new labor in your shop, are they trained properly so they can really get the work done fast?
So that, Rob, that's a question for me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to
Or Jen or Harold.
Yeah, I'll answer it really briefly, Rob, and then you and I can talk about it offline. Is we're fortunate in that we have a pretty solid, loyal crew going into the pandemic. Most of those folks have come back. We have had to hire beyond that, and it's not been any different than anybody else. It's been a challenging finding people in the market, but training hasn't been an issue for us because our core group, our intellectual knowledge is right there. It's never gone away. And so we are in the process of training those folks at Class of Exhibits. We're in a pretty good position. I know other people who may not have had as strong a culture may be challenged, but we're not challenged with that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging with us and for having this crucial conversation. I can't thank you enough for keeping the 360-degree conversations rolling through this time. And now as we're coming on the other side of it, it's I think going to be even more important to keep all the stakeholders involved in these conversations. So thanks for showing up. Thanks for the support. And above all else, thanks for your partnership and for your friendships. We really appreciate them and can't thank you enough. Kevin, you had to hold down the fort by yourself. You're going to have to give Bob some shit about this. I'm just going to tell you.
I will. No, I thank you guys for asking me here. Like I said, I think at any time in the future, just let me know. I'm more than willing to be.
All right, careful what you wish for.
You know, we got to do this. We got to do this.
Yes, agreed. 1,000%. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, till next time.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve. See you.